Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behaviour nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behaviour geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behaviour nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. You'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour geeks. But we will start today's episode where we are continuing our conversation with the wonderful Deb Jones. If you haven't listened to part one of this episode, then you can find it as the previous episode to this one in whatever you are listening to the show on. In part one, we learned all about Deb's behaviour odyssey and 25 plus years of working with and training animals and getting her perspective from that time. So I highly encourage you to check it out at the same time. If you want to just dive straight into part two, that is awesome as well. Deb is a retired psychology professor who now trains animals full-time. She has been training, as mentioned, for 25 plus years and focuses on positive reinforcement-based methods. Deb has written 12 books on dog training and has helped develop several DVD series. She has also trained and shown multiple breeds to high-level titles in agility, rally, and obedience. She is currently teaching online training classes and webinars at Fenzi Dog Sports Academy, and her newest project is the Cooperative Care Certificate Program in partnership with Fenzi. You can learn more about this at cooperativecarecertificate.com and also visit her website at canineinfocus.com for her blog and more information. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome back Deb Jones to the show today, who's patiently waiting by again. Deborah, thank you so much for taking the time to come back and hang out with us at Animal Training Academy.
Oh, no problem. I really enjoy it. Having fun being here.
Oh, wonderful. Hey, Deb, we left part one talking about many things, including your offering that you are a recovering perfectionist. We were talking about imposter syndrome and how you approach your own learning in 2022. One other thing we were talking about is how part of your behaviour odyssey did include some periods of burnout. So let's pick up where we left off. Can you share about your experience with burnout, Deb?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about that. I'm one of those people who I'm intensely interested in something or I'm done with it. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of in between. I can easily, become obsessed with a particular area, which is why I liked psychology, because there's so many little sub areas you can get into. And if I get tired of one thing, I can move to something else pretty easily. And the same is true in dog training. So when I first got the dog I first trained, Katie, to any level back in 1992, the only thing to do if you wanted to pursue like a dog sport was obedience, at least in the United States. That was about it. Competition obedience. Other than conformation, that was pretty much all there was. And so being a somewhat competitive person who wanted to get all A's and be perfect in everything I did, I also wanted to be perfect in dog training and in dog competition and do well. So I trained Katie, but of course I didn't like the methods that were commonly used at the time. I didn't want to, it was very common to use choke collars and pinch collars and lots of punishment in order to train, and that's not what I wanted to do. So here I am trying to go into a sport that's new to me when all of the tradition and the culture of that sport were very punishment-based. And so I walk into this thinking, well, I'm going to do it in a different way and I'm going to do it better, even though I don't really understand what I'm doing yet in any way. And so it was a struggle. It was challenging because there was nobody I could follow. There was nobody who could tell me how to teach these things in a more positively based way. And every time I made mistakes or every time things went wrong, people would blame it on the fact that I was trying to train in a very positively based way and say, well, you just can't do it like that. That's why we use punishment, because you can't use cookies. Cookies were like a bad thing. It was a terrible thing to do at that point in time. So that made it a hard place to be. I enjoyed the training a lot, and I was learning a lot about how to take the methods that I wanted to use and make them effective for the behaviors that I wanted to train. But there wasn't any support for me for doing that. There was nobody in my general area or that I even knew who had done, high level obedience training in a positive way. And also being my first dog that I trained, of course, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. But I continued through other dogs. I persisted, even though it was hard. And eventually, with my last 2 dogs, I did pretty well in competition obedience. I had a Papillon named Copper, who did really well in obedience. He was a nice little dog. And then my Border Collie Zen, who is now 14 and a half. He was the last dog I showed in obedience, and he got his utility dog title really, really fast. And we worked through a lot of problems, but we didn't continue on for the higher level titles beyond that. And I think at that point, it had just been a number of years of swimming upstream with competition obedience and fighting everybody telling me I was doing it wrong and seeing every mistake I made as proof that I didn't know what I was doing, even though I enjoyed it and my dogs did pretty darn well at it. Sometimes they did really well. Other times they didn't do great, but we had enough successes to keep me going. But I wasn't perfect by any means. So I was kind of getting tired of obedience. And luckily around, a little bit before that, agility came on the scene in the United States. And so that in many ways pulled in a ton of people who didn't do obedience or didn't like the rigidity of it or the structure of it or the culture of it. And so agility, there were a lot more people interested in positive training methods. And because not only did being accurate matter, but being fast mattered, and speed and enthusiasm mattered a lot. So agility was a lot more fun to go into. And I met a lot more people who wanted to do training the way I wanted to do it. And so it was easier to have support. It was easier to find people who were willing to kind of explore with me how to train obedience behaviors in new and different ways. Sometimes we did really well with it. Sometimes we made mistakes with the way we approached it or trained it, and we learned from that. And agility, we did so much with a lot of dogs, and it got to the point where it was a lot of the same. We're doing the same basic things over and over again every weekend, and I like new challenges. I get tired of it when it starts to seem easy to me. Not that agility was ever easy. There are always challenges, but to me, I just hit like a point where this is enough. I'm hitting these challenges. Sometimes they were very frustrating. Sometimes I was frustrated with myself because physically I couldn't move the way I wanted to move or as fast as I wanted to move for the dogs that I had. I had dogs that were much faster than I was. And that's a blessing and a curse in many, many ways. But I met a lot of great people in agility and I enjoyed it, but I just basically got tired of it at some point in time. But that's after doing it for a lot of years with a lot of dogs. And then I did some rally, which is kind of a nice mix of, not as structured as obedience, not as physically demanding as agility. You're still doing a lot of things. I just like working with my dogs. So I did a lot of rally with them and they did well with that. My last 2 dogs, Star is going to be 11. My Border Collie is going to be 11. And Zen, who, as I said, is 14 and a half now. I did a lot of rally with the 2 of them. And they were always fun because I would see who would beat who. And they would come in 1 and 2 most of the time. And the question was, would Zen win or would Star win? And that was fun for me. Probably obnoxious for other people, but it was fun for me. And so we did that for a while. But again, just overall, I think the whole competition thing was, okay, I can do this. I figured out how to teach this. Now I want to go on to some new challenge. And I'm done with that. that. And then it's on to new things. What else can I approach, and what else can I do next? That's going to hold my attention for a while, and that's going to allow me to work with my dogs. That I like that partnership, that whole training partnership that we get going, where we enjoy what we're doing with each other, no matter what it is. And that, to me, that's a lot of it. I have dogs that want to do whatever I want to do. It doesn't matter to them. They don't care what thing it is, as long as we're doing it together. And that's how I feel too. It's like, I don't care what thing it is. So, even before I'd gotten into competition, I taught a bunch of tricks. I did therapy dog work. I always, wanted to do things that we could work on together that were fun. And so a lot of it is just because. Why am I teaching this thing? I have no reason. I'm just teaching it to see if I can. And, sometimes I can. Sometimes it doesn't turn out the way I had quite hoped it would, or the thing I thought was going to be really easy turns out to be more complicated than I thought it was going to be. But again, moving on, always to those new challenges. And every dog that I've had now is different, and they all offer me, everybody wants the perfect dog. And I have known one dog that I would say was almost the perfect dog. And every dog has so many challenges, and it's not anything you want. I don't want my dog to have a challenge. I want my dog to just be easy, but that's not what we get. Right? And in the end, the challenges are what make us better trainers anyway. So wishing that I had easy dogs is kind of a waste of time. If I had easy dogs, I wouldn't have a career, because I would not have learned anything from those easy dogs. If they were the only dogs that, if dogs just did what I thought they would do when I thought they should do it, that wouldn't, I wouldn't have ended up to be a good trainer. There would be no reason for that. So I've, like I said, I just think it's that I enjoy the challenges more than anything else, and the doing of something different and the moving on. And I'm not one that tends to want to go backwards. I don't like to, move back because that was fun in the past. Let's do it again. It's like, no, that was fun in the past. Let's move on to something else now.
Well, a lot of gratitude for sharing all of that, and for sharing everything in part one. Deborah, we absolutely love on this show hearing about people's behavioral odysseys. So very grateful to you for sharing. Moving forward, I'm really excited to talk about your current passion project, if I may call it that, cooperative care. And you'll put together a list for us of 5 things you feel we can do to be proactive in making our cooperative care more cooperative. I love the way that question, that list is phrased.
Yes.
5 things we can do to be proactive in making our cooperative care more cooperative. I can't wait to work our way through this list, Deb. Can you start us off with number 1?
Okay, yes, I can definitely do that. And I think the first thing is realizing that you need to do it. Just this whole idea that, I can't just take my dog to the vet and expect everything's going to work out fine. That I really am going to have to put in some work. So coming to that realization that this is my job to make this better for my dog or cat or whatever animal, whether ferret or whatever animal you're dealing with, that it's on me to do the work. I think that's kind of the first step. Then I see, when I'm talking about making it cooperative, I want people to think about reading their dogs, to understanding your dog's body language, so that you know when they're comfortable with something and when they're becoming uncomfortable and when you're pushing them too far and the discomfort becomes too great. Dogs can be very subtle in their body language. So being able to read my dog means I know their moods. I understand them. I can look at them and know how they feel. And I can take those tiny little physical changes and get it right away. So we call those tells. So reading my dog's tells. A tell in gambling means that I can tell that you're lying. I can tell that you're trying to deceive me. But in dog training, the tell is I can tell that you're becoming uncomfortable. And so it might be something like being stiff and tense. That might be the only tell you get from a dog. And then the next step is they're going to try to bite somebody. So I want to see that tell. I want to see that tenseness first. I don't want to wait. So I'm looking on that before we even get into training, have I observed my dog enough to know what their body language is? And this is where I talked a little bit about working with other species in the last episode. I want to learn really fast in a different species what their behavior means, because that could be the difference between me getting hurt or not very easily. I would often be asking my friend Laura, now, when he does that, what should I, what does that mean? What does that tell me? Am I in trouble here? Should I be getting out of this situation? Should I be pushing forward? And so, this bird, he's fluffing up his feathers around his neck. Does that mean he's happy with what I'm doing? Does that mean he doesn't like it? So if you don't understand, find somebody who does. And then, which is what I do, and then pick their brains a lot to try to figure out, okay, what do these body language changes usually mean? And then when we get to dogs, of course, there are some obvious tells, and then the subtle ones. And then there are ones that are just specific to any particular dog. Sometimes I just know my dog, his eyes look like this, and it might not be true for any other dog. But that's kind of my second step is observe your dog a lot so that you understand when they're comfortable or not, because that becomes so important when we're working with them. Okay. So those are the first two things that I would say. Know you need to do it, first of all. Observe your dog. Break down the task. Okay, so handling and cooperative care is huge. It's like, well, what does that mean? It means a million things. It means giving my dog injections. It means them taking medications. It means wearing a cone. It means doing their nails. It means brushing their teeth. It means brushing them. I mean, cooperative care is a massive amount of procedures and behaviors. And so there needs to be a plan now to break this down, because it's overwhelming to try to think of it and do everything at once. We get that kitchen sink approach where we just throw everything in and try to do everything all at one time. And I'm a big believer in isolating one little thing at a time and doing just that thing until you're ready to move on to the next little thing. And the little thing might be, for example, people do their dog's nails. But before you do their nails, you want to be able to touch their feet. And lots of times people can't touch their feet. Well, can you touch the leg? And if you can't touch the leg, can you pick up the foot? So I go back to the thing that, they can do, and then we work forward from there. But we have to break all that down. We have to figure out where we can start to be successful. And that's always the thing for me. Go back to the place where the dog can be successful. That's where we start our work. If we're starting where they're having trouble, it's never going to get better. It's always going to be pushing them beyond their threshold from the very beginning. And so I don't want to do that. So I want to go back, go to the easiest place. And again, sometimes that's just holding up the clippers and seeing the clippers. Somebody say to me, my dog sees the clippers and they run. Okay, now how far back do we have to go in order to condition the side of those clippers to be something good instead of something scary? And so we have to work our way back. So being able to come up with a plan that's going to move you where you want, but starts where the dog can be successful and where you can move forward from there. Okay, that's kind of one of the other things. One of the big things to think about in terms of breaking it down into those parts. Another thing that I'd always tell people who are training dogs and working with their dogs is that moving slowly is more important than trying to move fast. Be the turtle is the saying that my students hear all the time. Turtle, go slow. You're not going slow enough. You're trying to go too fast. We all want to get to the end in training. And something in cooperative care that I have learned over and over again is that the slower you go, the more successful you are likely to be. That working a strong foundation, lots of reinforcement at the easier levels before I try to push ahead always pays off. If I try to push further, then I end up with regression, and we end up having to go back anyway because I've pushed my animal beyond their limits. So I'd say going slowly, understanding that slow is better and that I have to go even below the pace that my dog is comfortable with. and I can't push them. Every time I've tried to push, every time somebody tells me, well, I'm doing this next week, or my dog's going to the vet next week and needs a shot. And, it's like, we can't do it on that timeline. We can't do it on an artificial timeline. We have to move through it at the pace that's comfortable. What we're doing is classical conditioning with a lot of our cooperative care work. And that work requires underlying kind of emotional changes to what's being done. And those don't happen fast. Those kinds of changes take lots of repetition, and they take some time between repetitions in order for learning to happen and for change in reactions to happen. Which leads me, I guess, to the other thing. I think I'm getting up to 5 things now, is that this idea of classical conditioning. That there's two basic types of learning, classical and operant conditioning. Most people who've studied learning know this, but they don't quite appreciate the differences until you get to something like cooperative care. Because a lot of what we're doing is classical conditioning, which is fairly invisible under the surface learning. So we're not going to see big, obvious behavior changes. And we're going to see these little tiny incremental differences in responses and in reactions. And so people are looking for the major thing that they can see. That comes more with operant conditioning. With behavior change that's overt that we can see. Classical conditioning is much more subtle in the change that we're going to see, back to looking at your dog's tails and things along those lines. So knowing that you're not likely to see big changes up front, but if you work something a small amount over and over and over again, then all of a sudden you get where you want to go. But you can't see the change because it's so subtle. It's like from one session to the next, you don't see a lot of change. But if you videotape your sessions, which I always tell people to do, but I doubt they do, if you videotape them, you see a huge difference from where you started and where you end up, as long as you're consistent. The other thing I'd say is working a small amount every day, as opposed to, a big session here and then not working for 3 or 4 days, and then another big session. It's always less is more in terms of length of sessions. People they don't want to train unless they're going to train for like an hour. And my sessions are 2 minutes, if that. Shorter is better, right? And breaks in between short sessions. And this all has to do with processing information. We overload very easily. Animals overload very easily. So do we as people. Overload very easily with too much information. So little bits, time to let it sit and let it process. More little bits of information, time to let it sit and let it process. With my dogs, often, if I'm working on something in particular, I will do, I will do it 5 or 6 or 7 times a day, but I will only do it for a minute or 2 at a time. And then I won't come back to it for an hour and do another little session and come back to it in an hour and a half, or whatever it is. And those work much better than trying to cram it all in and do it all at once. As I always told my college students, cramming is not nearly as effective as spacing out your studying, and the same is true for training. And so I think people don't realize that you can get a lot done in a very, very short amount of time, as long as you're doing it effectively and you know what you're doing. Okay? And again, that goes back to this idea that I know what I want, but applying it is difficult, or execution is difficult. And one of the things that I try to do when I work with students and when I write, and when I come up with classes, is to make the execution as clear as possible, to break down the steps. I wouldn't say that I talk to people like they're stupid, but I talk to people like they have absolutely no idea about animal training. And here's, just do this. Okay? I don't assume any prior knowledge. I want to start, again, kind of where you can be successful, whether you know what I'm talking about or not, whether you've ever heard of classical conditioning or not. I want somebody who looks at my book to still be able to do this and to have success with it. And so I try to teach people in the same way that I've always taught animals. And I think I think we expect more of people sometimes than we do of animals, other species of animals, I should say. But I try to be the same, which is short little bits and very clear, lots of clarity. Clarity matters a lot. If we confuse our learner, then we lose them. And I don't want to lose them. I want them to be able to do whatever I'm asking them to do. And I want them to feel good about it. I want them to feel successful, whether I'm working with a dog or a person or a pig or a cockatoo or whatever. I want them to feel really good when we're done. I want them to feel like, wow, I'm good at this. I really nailed that. This I can do, and I can move forward and do more of this and want to do more of it. So I've failed if they don't want to. I said I want my animals to always want to work with me. I want my dogs to always want to work with me. But I want my human students to always want to work with me too. And to be able to be successful and to be able to feel like they know what they're doing and not to be confused or uncertain or unclear. And whenever I confuse somebody, that's on me. It's not on them. It's not that they couldn't get it. It's that I didn't communicate it properly. And so there's always a way for me to give more clarity in my teaching of everybody. Got off track again. So I tend to do that a little bit. Okay. So I'm sure I hit more than 5 things there at this point.
Yeah, and I want to go backwards and go through them all and talk about them a little bit more. But I love this idea of, I'm going to say number 5 was it takes time, which kind of blends with number 4, which was going slowly. And I like this idea of 2-minute sessions, keeping it short. I'm similar in my approach. Those who follow along my training know that. But I'm curious to know because you've got teaching experience longer than I've been. In double digits with regards to my age. I feel bad saying that.
I know where you're going with this, and you're trying not to say, yeah, that's fine. Yes, teaching longer than you've been alive was, sort of how it was going.
So I'm curious, how do you teach this to your students? How do you teach that balance? You've said in this episode and part 1, the importance to you of breaking things down into steps when you're teaching it to others. And also you've emphasized the importance of problem solving and focusing on the individual in front of you and being flexible with that. How do you teach all of this?
That's a good question. And it's interesting that we're usually basically left on our own to figure out how to become a good teacher. At least in psychology, I went through 9 years of higher education, and we didn't have any classes on how to teach. We had classes on all the content and all the information, but nobody really teaches you how to teach, something that you really have to seek out on your own. Let me talk about statistics. We'll go back to statistics and I'll talk about teaching, because I think that statistics for me taught me how to teach. And then I applied that from academics and from college teaching to teaching dog training. Okay. So I mentioned before that I didn't like math and I didn't want to do anything ever having to do with math. And yet I ended up teaching statistics in grad school because that's just life sometimes. And you don't get a lot of choices in what you do. And so I struggled. And of course, I didn't like math because I struggled with it. And that was the one, area that I never could do well. So when we don't do something well, we avoid it as much as possible. So when I found out that I was going to have to teach it, I panicked because I barely had a handle on it myself. And I realized, one of those flash of light things, that I'm going to have to stand up in front of a whole group of people and convince them I know what I'm talking about when I don't. So what I did was what I still do. I looked at the material and I broke it down into tiny little pieces as possible so that you couldn't possibly go wrong with it. I tried to make each step so easy that I wouldn't lose anybody in class, including myself. Right? So over the years, I did figure out how to do statistics, and I continued to teach it. And one of the things that I would do on the first day of class when I would go in to any statistics class, nobody else wanted to take statistics any more than I did, but they were forced to at some point. Everybody, who wanted the degree had to take the class. So I would say to them, everybody can pass this class. I'm certain of that. If you are here and you do the lessons one after the other, you will be fine. And that was very, very true. I made each part of it so easy and built one part on the next part on the next part. The only way you would have a problem is if you missed something in the middle. Then you couldn't do it. But if you followed each little micro mini lessons, I didn't assume people knew anything. And again, I'd say I'm not trying to treat you like I think you're stupid, but I assume nothing. I assume you have no clue what I'm talking about when I say find the average. I will tell you how to find the average, even though I don't want to insult your intelligence, but I'm telling you, this is how you do each little thing. And I think to me, it's the clarity. Break it down, make each tiny part clear. So I could do that for my human students. I could do that to break down their class information. And I got feedback over and over again that it was, ended up being much better than they ever imagined it would be, and much easier. And that they ended up being able to do things that they never thought they'd be able to do by the end of the semester. So I was pretty pleased with the way that I had set all that up and the way that I had worked on that. And did that to some extent in most of my classes, but statistics was the most cut and dried. When I get to teaching online classes then, which is what I've been doing for about the past 8 years now with online classes, we tend to have 6-week online classes, and we do some 1-week workshops as well. And I still find the best way to approach it is to break everything down into tiny lessons and not overwhelm people with a lot of information. Okay? I think sometimes instructors think that you're not giving people their money's worth if you don't tell them everything you know. So you kind of throw so much information at them that they're overwhelmed, and you've lost the most important part of your lesson because you've buried it in a bunch of other information. So I want to make sure that the most important part of my lesson is what stands out. And I will only give as much background information as I feel like is needed, or I will give it separately. So I might have a separate, supplemental lecture. If you want to know more about classical conditioning, here's a supplemental lecture on it. But here's exactly what I want you to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Do these 3 things and tell me how it works. And then if you're having a problem with one of those, then we will go in and troubleshoot it. And the problem, I have to say, the problems are almost always problems of mechanics from the trainer. When we fix trainer mechanics, amazingly, the dogs do exactly what we want them to do. It's us. It's not the dogs. We're not training the dogs. We're training the people to train the dogs. And if I can fix their mechanics, if I can give them enough in the way of mechanics, and again, I assume nothing. So if I say, and we found this over and over, toss a treat for your dog. Okay? I don't tell them just toss a treat for your dog, because you'd be amazed at the ways they do it that are like, I never thought somebody'd do that, huh? No, we say exactly, hold your hand low, have your palm up, bowl it, don't throw it, do 3 feet, do it. We give all these exact instructions so that people can get their mechanics right. Okay? And I'll do a lot of things like, say your marker, take a breath, give your dog a cookie. And instead of saying mark and treat, because mark and treat becomes all messy, and you get a lot of treat before you mark and treat at the same time. So if I say do it exactly in this order, so I'm very precise and specific with what the trainer should do. And when that happens, we rarely have to say anything about the dogs, because the dogs just kind of follow right along and do what we expected. So getting the instruction clear and simple, and having the trainer oftentimes practice it without the dog even first, so that they get the feel for it. Because this is what I ran into when I was into horses and riding horses and a lot, is you've got a new person trying to learn, with a new animal. Okay. But we would give them we'd give them the most experienced horses to the new people. So the animal already knew what to do. It was just getting the person's mechanics right. Okay. And here with most dog training, we've got the person and the animal that are new. So somebody has to know what they're doing. And if the dog can't know, then we have to get the person to know as quickly as possible. So we have to help them coach them through their part of it. And so I've in the online classes, the class I'm teaching right now is called Zen Logic, and it's all about impulse control, self-control kind of work. I very rarely say something about the animal at all, about the dog. It's like, except, yeah, they're doing great. Now here with your, when you do this, you need, and the person changes what they do. And, it's like magic. Gosh, the dog also does exactly what we want them to. So that breaking down into tiny pieces for people and making sure that it's so clear and trying to get rid of all the excess background noise that you get in classes. Again, I know why instructors do it. They feel like they've got to give people everything they know, so they feel like they've gotten their money's worth. But I think it's doing a disservice a lot of times because it's not helping them just get the very fundamental basics of the class, and teaching them what they want. Now, anytime I teach in a class, there's so much information. I put more in than people could possibly take. And I'm one of the people who probably does less rather than more. But, in 6 weeks, you're not going to learn, you take a cooperative care class and it runs for 6 weeks. I'm not guaranteeing you're going to be able to do all these things in 6 weeks. You may be, you may have to focus on one or two things and not get very far. But again, I'd rather do the foundation well, and I'd rather the person did the foundation well. Because they can build on it from there. But if we try to rush through and jam too much stuff into a class, I can guarantee that you're not going to do well at any of that stuff. It's going to be all kind of half-assed done. It's not nearly as clean as it should be in terms of training. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
And then how do you intentionally teach how to move from session to session? I'm curious what your 2-minute session looks like. Like you said, Denise can generate these amazing ideas quickly and have the confidence to try them. But how do you teach? Do a 2-minute session. Okay, review what just happened and use that review process to plan your next approximation, and then implement that in your next 2-minute session. Firstly, how do you do that? What is your process? And secondly, how do you incorporate that into what you teach?
Okay, okay. Those are good questions. I've discovered over time that less is always more when it comes to training, and I videotape a lot because I may be able to use it. So for me, there is an ulterior motive to taping all my sessions because, this may turn out to be something that I can use in a webinar or in a class or in a workshop or whatever. So I tape a lot, but that taping then allows me to go back and review. So when I do a session, I know exactly what I want to work on. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to end up being what I work on, because maybe that's not what my dog needs at the moment. But I'm pretty targeted in, okay, I'm going to do let's say I'm going to work on the retrieve, right? And I'm going to work on the hold. So the dog holds the dumbbell. And in this case, let's imagine I'm going to do it with a chin rest. I work on a hold with the dog holds the dumbbell and then puts their chin in my hand. And that's kind of my session. So I would work on the little parts of that. I might work on the chin rest. I might work on taking the dumbbell, chin rest, take the dumbbell. Let's put those together a couple of times. Okay, we're done. That's it. So we've done that. It might be a minute. It might be 2 minutes. And I've seen over and over again on student videos, a minute is enough. I can see what I need to see to give you feedback in a minute. You're just doing the same thing twice as long in 2 minutes. And if it's wrong, you're just doing it wrong for twice as long. So there's no point in showing me doing it wrong for 2 minutes. I can see it in one and give you some feedback. And the same for myself. If I'm doing something I don't realize, we do so much that's unconscious and automatic as trainers. I don't think about it at all. But we all have these little weird habits. And sometimes those habits are the thing that cause the problem with our dog's learning. They get in the way of the learning. And the sooner we see that, the sooner we can change it and make things better. So I would do my little session of my targeted whatever it is. I don't do, 3 or 4 or 5 different things at a time. And I don't do, real long sessions, though my dogs can take them. A lot of dogs can't and don't. But I have dogs that I could get away with more, but I don't. I try to, stick, this is what we're working on. We're working on this one thing. And after we have the session and I'm done taping it, I release them and we take at least a 2-minute break. Now, 2 minutes is not that long, but that's long enough. During that 2 minutes, I usually do a cookie scatter for my dogs. But I tend to be, then I'm reviewing the video. So I'm ignoring my dog. And that's actually important. I want my dog to be processing the information they just learned. If I keep throwing something new in and something new and something new, they haven't processed the little bits and pieces. They haven't had time to move them from shorter to longer term memory. So I want to make sure they have the opportunity on their own to just process for a bit, and so sniffling around for some cookies, going and getting a drink of water, usually then they'll come back and sit there and stare at me because they know I'm not done yet. But that's okay too, because they're not doing anything but kind of waiting. So then I'll review the video, I'll look at what I did, and I'll be like, I can't believe I did that, or, if you have somebody else that you train with, if you have another trainer that you trust, because Judy Keller and I train together a lot. And she'll be like, you're doing that. And I'll be like, no, I'm not. And then I'll look at the video and it's like, oh yeah, I was. I was doing that thing that I thought I was not doing anymore. It's like you're always turning your head or you're reaching for the cookie before you mark or, just those little things. But looking very carefully at those things tells me what to change for the next session. And I need to look at myself first, then look at my dog. I need to look at everything I'm doing and go, okay, is there anything there that's odd or that's off or that's sloppy? And sometimes I'll know it's sloppy, but I got away with it because my dog is still doing great. Okay. And I'll just make a mental note, stop doing that thing because, but other times it's like, it's bad enough that that's what's getting in the way and that's what's causing the problem. So then I need to make a change for the next session. So reviewing things, reviewing videotape or talking it over with somebody who can observe you and you trust their opinion, them being able to see, but really having it on tape so you can go back more than once. As what you think you did in a training session is not what you actually did. Right? And I see this with students even when they have videotape. They submit a videotape, and then in their text, they'll be telling me, what their concerns were or how they think things went. And what they'll say doesn't match what I see. It's like, now what you think happened and what you're operating on is not what actually happened in the video. I think a lot of times students don't review their videos. They just take them and then they submit them. But if you look at it, you go, oh, wait a minute. No, it's this, they'll be saying one thing happened. It's like, no, that's not how it went at all. That's not what we see when we observe it. So being able to step back and to look at your self-training and be objective about it. And go, okay, I can see I'm making mistakes here, here, and here, or I can see that I could do it better. There's something else, or I just want to try something different. Now, let me see how that affected my dog's behavior. So I tried something new. Is it making any difference? Is it making things better? Is it making them worse? So being able to judge and evaluate those kinds of things, video lets us do that, And there's no reason these days not to videotape. It's so easy, Everybody's got a phone. And it takes me I do everything on my phone. I don't edit anything. I always show sessions exactly as they happened. And because that's a pet peeve of mine is people edit out stuff they think isn't important. And that was the most important part. It's like, especially when you edit out something that didn't go right. It's like, no, I want to see that. I want to see the mistakes. I want to see the things that went wrong because I can fix that. If I only see what you think is good, then I don't have anywhere to go with that. I can't help you if you only show me the good stuff. So, feel free. And I often share videos of my training that I know have a lot of mistakes in them. And I'll point them out. It would be bad if I thought they were perfect. But if I can say to you, yeah, at, 110, I did this and that caused that problem, then that's just good learning for everybody. So I don't ever go back and fix. I don't ever edit anything. I just show the training as it happens, because that's a complaint people often have is it looks too perfect when the trainer does it. It's like, no, it doesn't look perfect when I do it because I make mistakes. They still complain then that my dogs know it too well or that my dogs are too good. But that I can't get a new dog for everything. So I could, but then I'd have too many dogs. I have too many dogs already. So anyway, yeah, the whole video thing. So I think the value of it is great. The value of video to help you become a better trainer is so huge that there's no reason that people shouldn't be doing it, that you shouldn't video almost everything. My young dog turned a year old yesterday, Wizard. And so I videotaped everything with him for about the first 6 months that I had him, every single session, and put him on a Facebook group, just so people could see, because they're often asking, how do you start a new puppy? What do you do with a new puppy? There's so much going on. So I'm like, okay, I'll just put everything out there. And so I taped everything, which is nice to have then when you want to go back later and you go, oh, look how little he was, or look how cute he was, or I forgot I trained that. And so it's nice to be able to go back and see, that timeline with video with your dogs as well. So well worth doing. That's for sure. And that's what makes online training so effective. I can look at your video and I can go back over it if I need to 3 or 4 or 5 times and see exactly what's happening. When you're with somebody in real life, it's very easy to miss those little moments. And it's much harder to be that specific and targeted. Okay, so I think online training in many ways is much, much better in terms of being effective. And that's the reason why that's pretty much all I do now.
Well, I have a ton of questions, but looking at the time, I'm going to push forward because there's something else I really want to talk to you about. But just that list, 5 things that we can do to be proactive in making our cooperative care more cooperative. Number 1 was first thing, just realizing we have to do it. Number 2, look for your dog's towels. Observe more. Number 3, break down the tasks. Number 4, go slow. And number 5, I don't know if I've worded this the same way you worded it. What I took away was just these things take time. They don't happen overnight.
Yeah, and being consistent. Keep working on it. It's like, consistent. Little bits over time do make a huge difference. So I'd say, that's important to know.
And so the other thing I wanted to make sure that we covered was some celebrating and some congratulating to you for the community that you've built on Facebook. Your Facebook group is 12,000. What is it now?
We're heading to 12,000. It's growing pretty fast, which just amazes me. Every time I add somebody new to the group, I'm like, wow, I can't believe this. It's the Cooperative Care with Deb Jones, and I just started it out to kind of support the class and the book. And I remember, and I actually saw on Facebook not too long ago, when you look back on memories, at some point I had said something about, wow, there's 500 people in this group now. I can't believe it. And then the next thing I know, I'm like at 11,500. And it's amazing to me the big reach that group has. As I ask people where they heard about it, and it's, my veterinarian or another group or my trainer or my neighbor. It's like, wow, there's this whole interconnected group out there, or a grooming group or, whatever the case might be. So, but it's a great place if you're interested in cooperative care in any way. Lots of support, lots of people who know exactly how hard this is and have run into the same problems you have. And lots of people who are willing to help you with troubleshooting and, kind of giving creative ideas, right, of the kinds of things that might be helpful. And kind people. I really insist on that. People have to be nice, no snarkiness, no acting like you're smarter than anybody else, no trying to shame people for what they have or haven't done. So, you can't help somebody if you're not being kind to them.
And way back in 1990 something, when you took your big floppy disk you talked about in episode 1 and your phone, and you connected to the internet for the first time, and you found these listservs, and you appreciated what I took away from what you were saying. You appreciated suddenly having a community of people who are interested in the same thing. But as you just put it then, people who have been in your shoes and can have empathy for what you're going through, compassion for what you're going through because they've been there as well. This is, for me, one of the big benefits I see from community. But I get the sense through the community that you've built, and through your mentioning in part 1 of the listservs you're on, and the importance that you find in meeting new people and getting different perspectives. How important is community for trainers, for beginner trainers, for experienced trainers? Is it something that's important to you, or does it just happen to be coincidental that you've got this huge community?
Oh no, I think it's really important. I think we all need to feel supported, to feel like there are people who understand the kinds of things that we're going through, the challenges that we face. And I've been involved in even areas out of dog training in an online grief community, grief group, after my son died some years ago. And to know that there are other people who have the same experience, yet have different perspectives on it and have different approaches to it and have different ways of coping with things. And so you see that we all get caught in our own little narrow view of the world. And I think that it's important to expand that in any way we can, to get ourselves out of our own personal experience and to see it through the eyes of other people. And that often, I think, makes it better. And it gives us different ideas. It gives us different approaches. And it just lets us see that we're not alone in whatever struggle we happen to be in at any particular point in time. And so I think that matters a lot. I personally have learned so much from other trainers that I've been involved with. And without them, I wouldn't be any good. Nobody would want to hear what I had to say, because without the views of all those other people and without the support of all those other people, I wouldn't have anything to tell or anything to say, because I've taken everything I've ever learned and, what's the word? How do I want to say this? I've taken everything I've ever learned and integrated it into something that's unique to me, yet those ideas aren't mine. They aren't all mine. They came from so many different sources. And that's sort of one of the things that I think is smart, is to surround yourself with smart people, surround yourself with good people, surround yourself with the kind of people you want to be, and they'll make you better. They'll make you so much better than you could ever be on your own. I see this we have an instructor group for Fenzi Dog Sports Academy, our own little group, and I see this all the time. It's like, these people amaze me. They're so smart, and they're so thoughtful, and they make me a better trainer every time I interact with them, because either they give me support or they give me ideas, and that I think everybody needs that. We all need that. And we can have that now. Yeah, coming from that first internet experience, when AOL used to dial up to now, things are very, very different than I ever imagined they would be when I started, back in grad school, when I started getting involved with people all over the world on the internet. Right? And then I remember when I would first look at my class lists online and go, wow, I have a student from Thailand, I have a student from Scotland, I have, a student from China. And it's like, it's just amazing that we can all interact and that we can learn so much from each other. I don't think it's ever the case where the instructor or the teacher is the only one who knows and the only one who gives information. I think it's much more collaborative type of learning than that. Okay? And without other people, you're not going to learn anything. You're just going to do what you do over and over again. And like I said, I don't like that. I don't like being stagnant. I like something new happening all the time and learning something new all the time. Okay?
Well, thanks so much for sharing everything, Deb. Sadly, though, this does bring us to our final question for these 2 episodes. Can you please take the listeners of this show now into the future? and share what you would like to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years in the positive reinforcement and the animal training world.
Oh, that's a big question. And I'd say it kind of goes back to a couple of things I've talked about before. One of those is I want trainers to be educated not only in academic knowledge, but also to be able to effectively practice, to be able to actually change animals' behavior. Because I see people who can do one or the other, but it's hard, you don't see so many who do both, who span both worlds. I used to have some really, really brilliant psychology professors who couldn't teach an animal to do anything. In fact, they wrote the textbooks on learning and behavior, and they couldn't change an animal's behavior if you gave it to them to save their lives. They just couldn't do that. So I'd like to see that combination. I don't think you can learn to be an animal trainer by taking a multiple choice test. I don't think you can learn to be an animal trainer by reading, though, as I said in the last episode, I think it's an important foundation, and I read everything I could get my hands on. So that combination of knowing and doing for animal trainers is important, and I think people need to seek that out for themselves. Take every opportunity to learn in both theory and in practice. The other thing I would say is, as I've said, surround yourself with people you want to be. Surround yourself with smart people. Surround yourself with trainers, talk to the trainers you admire. And you'd be amazed at, what they're willing to share with you and how much they're willing to help you. Because I think fondly of the students who have come to me like after a seminar or after a class, and wanted to know more. That's like the best thing. I'm happy to share that information. And overall, in the dog training community, don't fight with each other. Just do what you do and do it better, and quit telling people what they're doing wrong. Because that doesn't help. It's like when you focus on doing what you think is right and doing it as well as you can do it, people will be convinced. You don't need to tell them that they're doing something incorrectly. Let them come to you when they see how well you're doing. Don't try to tell them ever what they're doing wrong, because they don't want to hear that. And that's not going to positively influence anybody. So I can stop with that.
Taking every opportunity to learn in both theory and practice, and surrounding yourself with people you want to be like. I think some of the online offerings that you have facilitate these things that you want to see happen. So before we wrap up, maybe you could just share with everyone where they can go online to find out more about you, to get in touch, to take some of the offerings that you've been talking about in these episodes.
Sure. Yeah. You can find my online classes and workshops and webinars through FenzieDogSportsAcademy.com. So everything that I do online, pretty much everything is on there. I have the Facebook group Cooperative Care with Deb Jones. So everybody's welcome there. And I write blog posts regularly. I used to say weekly, but, in an attempt to be not so perfectionistic, I write them whenever I feel like it now. And so that's, my website is K9 in Focus. And you can find k9infocus.com/blog, and my blog posts will come up. There's a bunch of them on every topic I can imagine in dog training. There's probably a blog post out there for it, because I like to write. That's what I do. So those are the main ways I think that you can find the things that I do and that I'm working on.
Fantastic. And we will, of course, link to all of this in the show notes as well. Deb, this has been so much fun. So from myself and on behalf of everyone listening, we really appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with us. It's really appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much, Ryan. I have enjoyed it. Who doesn't like talking about themselves in dog training? What's not to love?
Makes my job easy.
Yeah, thank you.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much, everyone, for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.